Okay, everyone. Hello and welcome to today's webinar. It's titled An Introduction to ForgeRock Identity Cloud. My name's Alexandra. I'll be the MC for the next hour. So thank you so much for joining the conversation today. Before we get started, we'll cover some of the webinar functionalities. So during the webinar, everyone's microphones will be muted, but we want this to be an open discussion. So if you have any questions at all, please enter them in the Q&A box or chat window at the bottom of your screen. There will be a dedicated question and answer session after the presentation. So today's webinar is also being recorded and a copy is going to be sent out to all registrants at the end of the week. So today's speaker, we have Michael Stapleton. He's an exit certified instructor. Michael started programming in the early 1980s and began training others in 1999. Today, he has expertise in teaching a broad suite of technologies, including Kubernetes, Mirantis, Docker, AWS, ForgeRock, Hadoop, and enterprise Java development. Michael has been a trainer with us at ExitCertified since 2004. So you might ask yourself, why choose ExitCertified for your ForgeRock training? So professionals like you have been training with us since 2001. You want to know that your training provider has the credibility to earn your organization's trust, and ExitCertified delivers. We have vendor-approved IT training, which is our only business. When you train in our facilities, you'll find well-equipped classrooms and friendly staff who are dedicated to making your learning experience comfortable and productive. And when you train remotely with our IMVP virtual platform, you'll see that our investment in technology makes online learning every bit as engaging as the training that you take in person. So if you have any questions about why you should take a ForgeRock training course with ExitCertified or which course is right for you, reach out to us and we'll get started with our presentation here today. So Michael, I want to hand it off to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Alexandra. Welcome, everybody. Yep, my name is Mike Stapleton. I'm going to be your guide for this look at what the ForgeRock Identity Cloud really is. Right? You think it's the first time I start teaching. I've been doing it since 1999 and still have a hard time with PowerPoint. All right, this is me, ForgeRock Identity Cloud. But what we're going to do is I'm not going to start with the Identity Cloud. I'm actually going to finish it with it, because I always find that if you really want to understand something, you kind of need to look at the problems it solves. And while we do that, you're going to see that the Identity Cloud is actually made up of some other products that are put together as a hosted managed solution. So I'm going to work backwards from the problems and the components and the features that we end up with in the Identity Cloud. And I think that makes an easier way, better way to actually truly understand what's going on here. So pieces and things we're going to talk about in here. First off, some major components. We have something called Access Manager. Its kind of original idea was all about achieving single sign-on. We delegate authentication and authorization to this component. Right? So we have resources we want to protect, and AM is our way of controlling who can do what within those resources. So there's that part we're going to look at. Now, it requires some kind of enforcement mechanisms. Access Manager itself is kind of makes the decisions about who can get in and how we authenticate people. Identity Gateway is a component. As you'll see, it's a reverse proxy, and we route our traffic through this reverse proxy in front of our resources. So anything, users, mobile devices, services that want to access our resources, we actually route the traffic through the Identity Gateway. And it has the opportunity to do enforcement of our policies as configured in Access Manager. So it's really the security guard. Everything goes through there, and it can say, no, you're blocked. Right? The next big thing from a large standpoint is Identity Manager, right? Identity information. We have information about, we often say users, but really it's things, and people are just a form of thing. Sounds bad when I say it like that, but yeah, you have like IoT devices, you have human beings, we have information about things and people, and we need to manage that information on behalf of applications that actually need to use that information. And an example right now would be Access Manager. When Access Manager needs to authenticate someone, it needs access to their credentials and identity information. Who manages that information? Not Access Manager, it just uses it. So we have to manage the actual identity information, and that's mainly Identity Manager. Now we're also going to talk about remote connection servers. This is something that's been around for a while, but is this really, really important when we get into the Identity Cloud, because what we're going to have with the Identity Cloud is a hosted managed instances of these programs, Access Manager, Identity Manager, everything we're going to talk about here is going to be hosted, managed by ForgeRock on the cloud. So they need access to your systems internally. How do we accomplish that? For identity information, we have these things called remote connection servers, where the cloud through these remote connection servers can get access to the repositories where you have identity information, so it can help manage them. So you'd be running these locally, either on-prem or maybe on another cloud. I mean, in the end, they're processes that we run in VMs, so they can run anywhere, really. Anytime you're taking any cloud training and they say, and you can do this on-prem, it's also another way of saying you could also do this on another cloud vendor, just saying. The identity platform is basically all of these things integrated, because these can be deployed as individual components. When we do integrate them together, though, it brings in a change to them a bit. One of the main things is journeys. So we're going to look at journeys. Journeys are kind of the magical super. As an administrator trying to manage your like, how do you manage identity information, user self-service? How do you authenticate people? Do you do push notifications? Customizing all of that, historically, not so much fun. A lot of work, employment, a lot of work for a lot of time trying to figure it. But now we actually can manage all of that stuff with a drag and drop interface. It's really sweet. So we're going to take a look at that, give you an example. And then finally, we'll end up, the Identity Cloud. So you'll see it's all of these things put together, plus a little bit of extra stuff. And I'll give you a little demo of what that looks like later on. All right. So to start off with here, ForgeRock Identity Cloud is an identity and access management solution. So specifically identity and. So that's those two components: identity, IDM, Identity Manager, and Access Manager, right? So those are major components we're going to see here, right? So Access Manager, been around for a long time, started way back when, Sun Microsystems, so it's robust. It's all the bugs have been worked out for most of the functionality. It's well groomed, been around for a long time, super configurable. It's got a long history there. Now, Access Manager itself, SSO, that's its primary goal. You log in once and you can access anything behind it. So it does authentication and authorization, right? Who are you? And then once we decide who you are, you're allowed. It does also integrate with external systems. So it supports Federation, SAML, OAuth as well. So if you want to integrate with social identity providers, right? Log in with Google, Facebook, those kinds of things, no problem. Supports user managed authorization. If you are developing some kind of a service where the users within your service need to be able to share information among themselves. So a user shares their information with another user and can unshare it. If you need that functionality, Yuma is kind of an open standard way of doing that. So before you try to write everything from scratch, you should seriously look at using it. And Access Manager will help you way along that lines because it supports it. So, adaptive risk, you'll see when we configure our especially authentication, how do you authenticate people? And authorization, how do you authenticate them for different areas in your site? Because you might decide that if they just need basic access to the site, we'll just do a username and password. But if they need to access their profile information or something along those lines, maybe then we're going to do some form of step-up authentication. Yeah, you're already logged in, but we're going to get you to log in a different way. This time we're going to ask you for push notification. So you get a notification on a mobile device, click on the button. Yeah, that's you. You're proving you control the device. Maybe a retinal scan, maybe blood from your, no, I don't. It's really, really, really flexible. And you can make your own customizable nodes. And there's third-party marketplace for nodes and things. So really, really, and then the intelligent part is you can craft it just exactly the way you want based on the information someone connecting. So if someone's connecting from some strange country that they normally don't, well, you can, do multi-factor, you can, really, really customizable, REST API for everything. Scripts that you can have custom scripts executed when people are doing authentication, for sure. Yeah, that's pretty cool. In AM, I should say, they have what are called trees, but then you'll see they get kind of renamed to journeys later on. They become journeys in the platform, and currently we're calling them journeys. I really like the name journey. We call them trees. Either way. So originally they were trees. And the idea is you have a UI, which I'll show you later on, and you drag and drop and connect nodes, which represent some kind of functionality together. So this is just a simple example of someone needs to get authenticated. And we're first going to check to see if they provided username and password as HTTP headers. If they did, we're going to go and use our identity store to see, do they got the right username and password? If they do, yay, they're in. If they didn't provide them as headers, well, then, we'll assume they have a web browser, and we're going to send them back. Actually, it doesn't have to be a web browser. I shouldn't say that because it could be a mobile device or something like that. We're going to send what's called a callback, which is a JSON object saying, hey, give me your username, give me your password, and then we'll use that information to authenticate them. And again, if they're in, they're in. And if not, well, we're just looping around here. A real world, you would have more involved in here, like maybe retries and things, and locking accounts if they retry too much. But yeah, you can implement all those extra features as you want. If you need something done, if someone logs in, you just want to keep track of how many logins there is without credentials, you could drop another node in the middle here as just a counter of some sort. And then through metrics, you could see the value of that counter over time. It's not just, it's administrative requirements you can also do in here, business requirements. This is a little more complex example using push authentication. And you can combine these all together. So in this case, we're going to get their username and password, and then we're going to send a notification to their device. If their device isn't registered, in this case, well, too bad. Again, maybe in the real world, you would have another node in here that they could register their device. If we did send the notification, then we're going to wait. And if it's success, again, failure. Yeah, basic, not real world. You got to fit it on the screen. But you can customize in any way you want. You're just grabbing nodes. There's a whole bunch of nodes and connect them together to implement your functionality. The identity gateway. Yeah, we need a policy enforcement point. We got to route traffic through something that can block. That's its main reason for in this discussion. Anyway, but it is a reverse proxy, and you can use it standalone for other purposes. It's just one of its major features is a policy enforcement point, but it can do data wrangling, munging of data, same idea. As traffic goes through it, it can change it. You can even have scripts executed that control how that data is changed. It's really, really, really flexible. It also is available in micro gateway, basically a sidecar in Kubernetes. So if you have anything running, especially in Kubernetes, microservice architected applications and whatnot, and you want to enforce authentication authorization in between your microservices, we have support for that. Also, I don't mention it here, but yeah, we have support for IoT devices and much more than mentioned during this lecture. Check out ForgeRock.com. So here's a bit of the architectural story that I'm going to give you here. It's a little bit of drawing. Bring up paint here, just find it convenient. So the basic idea is that we have our users, maybe mobile devices, something that wants access to our resources that are over here, right? So instead of having them directly talk to those resources, what we'll do is we'll route the traffic through the identity gateway. Now the identity gateway is going to look to see if they have some form of credentials, some token. And if they don't, pretty typical, we'll have them redirected to AM to actually authenticate them. And then through those trees, later on journeys, you can totally customize how they get authenticated. Once we've authenticated them, and often based on identity information stored in LDAP, right? So maybe AD or some other LDAP there, they get sent back. So let me just clean that up a bit. And now they're coming back with the actual token. Now we know who they are, right? IG knows who they are. Underneath, it's a lot more complicated. This, by the way, it's doing OIDC underneath to get that token over there. But they end up with a token. And then we can do authorization. So now that IG knows who they are, it can send a request to AM saying, hey, are they allowed? It's asking for a policy decision. AM, based on the configuration of things called policies, can then return and say, yeah, this user is allowed to do these things to that resource. Again, totally customizable, scriptable if you need it dynamic, but it's going to come back with, yeah, this is what they're allowed to do. And then the policy enforcement part of IG can go, oh yeah, well, access manager, the decision point says you're not allowed. And that you could have it redirect somewhere, another site, whatever you need to do, or yeah, let them through, and they get access. And then the SSO part comes in here is that now they've been authenticated. If they need to access another site, well, they can just go off and access it because they've already logged in. As long as they're authorized, no problem. So they logged in once, now they can go off and access all these different apps. Right? This guy can also add data. Like I said, it munges the data. It can add user identity information for those apps so they know who they're talking about and other things. So yeah, that's the kind of major story for AM. It does have a bit of user self-service, and because it could be used standalone. So yeah, there are companies that just use AM all by itself. It works. And if you need to automate things, DevOps, yeah, it's all REST API driven. All right, let's keep going. So AM, Identity Manager. Right? Identity Manager is concerned with the creation and management of management of identity information and synchronizing it to other locations. Right? The managing of information, it has a REST API, it has system administrative interfaces so that you can see and manage identity information, but also it has user self-service interfaces, kind of like AM does, but specifically for identity information where users can see their own profile information, they can update it, it has user self-service, they can recover their passwords, all that normal kind of stuff that users need to do. So that's the sense of creating and managing identity information. And then the other big part is the synchronizing of it. IDM was originally designed so that we could leave our applications using their identity in their preferred identity store the way they want it. Instead of trying to make all of your systems use one identity store where you can kind of have it all centralized, yeah, just leave them using their defaults, and then have a third-party app, Identity Manager, to synchronize that information in between those systems. That's its main reason for being, because in a large enterprise environment, trying to make everything except the same schema in the same location becomes really brittle and just non-working. If you come from a Windows environment with AD and everything's just using it there, it might not seem like such a big problem, but from an enterprise, especially Unix, Linux background, yeah, trying to make every application access the one scheme and LDAP problematic. Right? Other things Identity Manager does is the identity kind of lifecycle information. So perfect example here is knowledge-based questions. When you register an account somewhere and they want to be able to have an alternative way to authenticate you. For example, if your password expires, they're going to want to know, hey, what's your mother's maiden name? What's your favorite color? Right? Knowledge-based questions. Issues with that is, well, what if things change? What if you need more? Right? Maybe in the beginning you set everything up and you're just asking one of the security questions. So the customers answer one security question. Some are, what's your favorite color? Other ones, what's your mother's maiden name? That kind of thing. And then later on, policies change and you decide, no. When someone goes to recover their password, we have to ask for 2 or 3 or more, right? Not just the one question. Well, you've got a whole bunch of users who onboarded but only answered one question. You need to make them come back and answer additional questions. Otherwise, the next time their password expires, they're not going to be able to recover their password. AM doesn't support that, right? Whereas IDM will. When you make changes to your requirements, IDM, the next time users come along, it can prompt them, oh, you need to answer another question. Right? And then they can select from the available questions, update it. Now, next time in the future, if their password expires, they've got all their questions up to date and it'll work. Right? Same thing with something called progressive profiling. Great, you onboarded people, you got the information you thought you needed, but business requirements change, and now they've decided we need everyone's telephone number. So you have all these identities, no telephone number. Well, with IDM, next time people go to IDM, or at some point later on, as you control it, you can have it prompt them for the telephone information. You don't have to write code or anything to do that, really. So this kind of idea of managing the life cycle of your identity information, it helps with that. The compliance part, yeah, dashboards for the users so that users can see the information you have, they can delete it. They can also do things like control whether you share information with third party, say marketing companies and whatnot. They can actually control that through their UI if you support it. And so users can say, yeah, I don't mind you sharing my information with marketing, but in the future they could go in and they could say, no, I don't want that anymore. And underneath that actually controls where Identity Manager copies data to. So when someone consents, their data might end up in some kind of a database or CSV file that's used for that purpose. And then when they change their mind later on, they actually get removed out of it. So the users themselves are controlling the lists that you use for doing different functionality, marketing, email campaigns, those kinds of things. So yeah, the UI helps with compliance, regulatory requirements, and well, again, a lot more than AM does because this is what it does, right? And also really highly customizable, scriptable, event-driven. Often when you're learning these things, the fact that they're so customizable, they're a bit amorphous, it's hard to learn in the beginning. Because the idea with ForgeRock products is they integrate into your stuff. You don't change everything to work with ForgeRock. ForgeRock adapts to work with you. So it has to be really, really flexible and configurable. There's usually many different ways of accomplishing the same thing because different people need things a little differently. Hey, here's the basic architectural story for IDM. And the idea here is we have different identity stores. So like this, whoa, let me get my pen, like this guy over here, these applications. They said they're all just kind of whatever, they're storing there. You have different places where you have identity information, and it doesn't need to be the same. Right? The idea here generally is you configure what are called connectors. Connectors are plugins to get access to these external systems. So they could be databases, they could be files, they could be SSH connections, they could be REST APIs, they could be anything. You can make your own custom connectors. And then that gives IDM access to these systems. So I'll just do these kind of lines in here. And then through these connectors, we can send data. They could be multi-directional, they could be single directional, but these plugins give us access. And when you configure mapping, you control which identities, which attributes of which identities you synchronize between all of these systems. So you can set it up so that if a user is created in one site, it can get synchronized into IDM, and then maybe that information only goes out to 2 other places. It'll copy the data around. And when it does it, it might be just some information. Maybe it leaves out credit card information. Maybe it munges the data. For example, you have some kind of a legacy system where the username needs to be in all uppercase. COBOL, anyone? Yeah, IDM, as it copies the data, you can provide scripts that process that data so you could have it converted as required. So the idea is it keeps the data synchronized in between these different systems, how you want it, the way you want it, and gives you a REST API if you want to manage it all in a single location. So now you've got a single REST API to access and manage all that information, even though it's distributed all over the place. And again, it's got its self-service UI, so customers can see their information, maintain their information, recover their passwords, all that great stuff. Now, it's not meant for single sign-on, right? It's identity management. That's its whole superpower, let's say. So Identity Manager, all about the managing and synchronization of that identity information. All right. Put these things together and you get a bit of magic. So the platforms, because, well, we typically need functionality of all of it. Right? So for example, I was just last week, I was trying to help someone. There was some functionality they were trying to implement in IDM, and it's funny how sometimes a simple thing ends up being the difficult thing. So it looked like it ought to be a simple thing to do, but really a pain. And I'm like, this would be so easy in journeys. 2 minutes, you'd have it done. Meanwhile, they've been working on a week for it. So anyway, integrating them together because we generally need both functionality. So the platform, you can see here, we have let me just get this guy here. We have not only IDM, which we were just looking at there. So it helps us manage our identity information, right? Synchronizing everything that's there. But we also have AM, right? And we got our IG because we're doing authentication authorization, same as before. Maybe black would be better. So we go through, we get redirected, we log in. We have self-service, but this is managed in journeys, way more flexible than the self-service in IDM, way more. So yeah, you can customize self-service in IDM, but with journeys, I can do it by drag and drop in my own custom nodes, all kinds of things. So yeah, that's just light years. That's awesome. It's like, yeah, just love it. Anyway, so that's one of the magical powers of the platform. When you integrate it here, self-service is configured just like authentication through trees, journeys. Anyway, so we're logging in, we're getting access to resources, and we're creating and managing identity information through IDM because it is much better at doing that. And again, when we do our self-service, when it's integrated, yeah, these things are working together basically as a single product, really. There's tight integration between them. A little bit of everything that we need. All right, I think that's good. Yeah. So here's some example journeys. Social registration. So you want people to be able to log in / create an account with Facebook, Google, or whatever. So this is an example of configuring that. So they have a single page that'll come up. They have a node for that if you want to group things on a single page and as their journey, as their process, their journey through getting access or changing their password or whatever you're trying to do with this journey. In this case, registering through social media. So we're going to get their username and password and let them select, do you want to log in or do you want to log in with, all right, so they can log in with username, password. That's the bottom one down here. Actually, let me get a laser pointer. That's a little easier to see. So you can see down here, local, we just got the username and password. If we get the decision node, this will check their identity store, username, password, LDAP, right? And if it's good, it's hard to see, but it goes and they're in. Well, we keep track of their login count. So we have a node here that just keeps track of that for us. Stored as an attribute of the user. And if they fail, we don't give them too much of a choice here. Again, you could make this more complex if it fails and give them retries and stuff. If they choose to log in with Google or Facebook or whatever we supported, well then, yeah, it'll initiate an OIDC grant and we will get a JSON web token with their identity information from the provider. And then here's the magic coming in here. Well, what if well, first off, are they new, right? If we've never seen them before, how do we know we've never seen them before? Well, we compare the email address as the default. It's a pretty standard thing. So we'll get their email address from the identity provider and we'll compare it to the identities we already have. And this is identifying an existing user, right? So if the first time they're logging in with Google, we check to see if they've logged in another way, maybe Facebook, maybe a local account. If they have logged in with, let's say, Facebook, well, now we know they got a Facebook account, they got a Google account. We're going to want to merge these things together. So this is where we go, oh, yeah, you already logged in as John some other way. And we give them an opportunity and say they logged in with Google. And now we go, yeah, we found another social account where they logged in. They could log in with Facebook the second time. And if they manage to log in with Facebook and they logged in with Google, we know those two accounts are linked. So we'll link the accounts. So now they can log in either way, but it still is the one identity in the identity store. Right? Otherwise, yeah, we're basically going to say, no. But that's the basic idea. And you can make it more complex. This is from the documentation where I grabbed this. Here's just, as I said, when we get in the journeys, it's not just authentication. So as part of a tree, progressive profiling, mentioned this earlier with IDM, where you need extra information later on. So in this example, what we're going to do is we're going to check to see how many times they've logged in, because we were gathering that information. And we're going to check to see if certain attributes aren't set. So if there's certain information we need and they've logged in enough times, then we're going to ask for that information and update their account. So maybe it's their telephone number, maybe, whatever it is you need done. Or maybe just as an example, you just need to have a record in a database when people have logged in the 10th time or something. You could actually just have a script that gets executed instead of doing this, and use this, just this login count, add your script. If they have already logged in 10 times, your script executes, does a REST API call to some external system. If not, you need any business processes, whatever you need to do. These journeys really make that easy to implement. Really, really super, super dynamic. Just simple example. There's a lot more. Right? Something I haven't talked about, high availability. Need to talk about that. My drawings are simplified. So all of your components need to be fault tolerant and scalable, right? If your identity management system, especially authentication authorization, goes down, the lights go out. No one can log in. Data isn't being synchronized. Is going to be bad. So the reality of one of those drawings was, you're going to have clusters of machines behind load balancers. Data stores are going to have replication. For example, IDM stores its identity information in a repo, which can be directory servers. Typically, though, is relational databases. And if you got a relational database, you're going to have to configure it for HA. That goes down, you're going to be in trouble. AM itself stores all of its information in directory servers. So you're going to have lots of directory servers. They need to be ForgeRock directory servers, and you have to have synchronization replication set up between them, so you don't have any single points of failure. So the real world, of course, is it's pretty complex. Now, it could be run in Kubernetes. There's a DevOps samples that can all be containerized. ForgeRock supplies your container Docker images and or the Docker files for creating your images. And this is simplified examples. So we have the different components here, AM, IDM, their repository. It's not showing ingress controllers and services and autoscalers and all the other kind of Kubernetes components that make this up. But you can absolutely run the platform locally on your own infrastructure. Just now you need to know Kubernetes, and you got to manage that, and which is cool. I love Kubernetes, but if I don't need it, if I like Kubernetes, but it doesn't mean I always want to run Kubernetes. And in the real world, we just want the functionality of these services. I don't want to manage it. That's the reality, right? I've done a lot of system administration over the years because it's a requirement. But as a company, you just want the functionality of it. So managed services, right? Managed services, the idea is outsourcing. The bottom line, you outsource the management of it and then you use it, right? So the Identity Cloud is that platform on the cloud, built, managed, patched, updated, everything for ForgeRock, right? So it's hosted. Technically, it's in Google Cloud. That's actually where it's really running. It's running Kubernetes, but you don't see that. You don't know. You don't. Hey, great. See no evil. Don't want to know. I just want it running. Right? They build it. They host it. They patch it. They upgrade it. They back it up. They scale it. Right? You just use it. That's really what you want to do. And that's a big deal. That's a lot of work maintaining all of these components. It's expertise you have to have. Even if you do have the expertise, time you have to do it. And it's risk when you're doing it yourself, and especially when you're in a rush, you're pulled in many different directions. It's very easy to make mistakes, and mistakes in these critical infrastructure is expensive, right? According to Forrester research, organizations can numbers, right? But development costs by 80%. By using cloud managed solutions. You just use it, right? You don't have to worry about it. Labor costs, you can redirect employees and work on what differentiates you from everyone else, and not building and managing the infrastructure as much as possible. Right? And people are moving to the cloud. If you are expecting to totally move to the cloud, right? The identity and access management is going to have to move too. It's one of those things. And yeah, we're talking about IAM, but this is not the same as IAM and AWS. That's just within Amazon for their own APIs, not for your applications. We're talking about identity access management for your apps and services. So, yeah, it runs in Google Cloud technically. You have what's called a tenant. You have access to your tenant. It's made up of multiple environments because, again, critical infrastructure here. You don't want to be making changes in production. So you actually make changes. You have 3 environments. You have a development environment where you can make updates and try things and experiment with, example identities and whatnot. You then promote it to staging. That's a whole nother deployment. You don't see it or anything. You do this as a request to ForgeRock. They manage it. This is QA, right? So then you can go through your tests and everything with larger identity sets and hammer at it a while and make sure everything was good. And if it's good, then you can have that promoted into production, right? So they help you with the life cycle. That's really, really critical. Right? Now, yeah, it's running on the cloud. And then, but you have resources and identity information somewhere else, right? On-prem, other cloud vendors, wherever, as long as it got networking. AM is hanging out there. So you have to have identity gateway to, if you want to do authentication authorization, right? We route the traffic through it. So you can be running identity gateway locally. And identity gateway can be sending its requests for decisions to the identity cloud. So you configure, you control everything in the identity cloud, but your traffic stays in-house and on-prem, right? Just requests. For the identity management part, to extend and give it access to your identity information systems for synchronization, if you want to do that, then you run an agent locally. And the identity cloud interfaces with the agent to synchronize data between your on-prem / another cloud providers. Right? So yeah, this agent runs wherever you are, and it maintains a WebSocket connection through the firewall. That way you don't have to open up connections. The identity cloud doesn't initiate a connection. The agent initiates the connection and then keeps the socket open so that when it's time to synchronize or copy data or needs to do something, it has an open connection and can get access to the connectors that run in here. And the connectors interface with your identity. So yeah, definitely. So this is kind of what it looks like. Now you have the platform basically running on the cloud, and has some management interfaces, right? You have those different stages and everything, so you can go through your development staging for configuration. It has a separate, very customizable UIs for your users. So another benefit of the identity cloud over the platform, like there's little extras here. Not only is it a hosted solution, but it has a way easier, nicer way for customizing your user interface, right? You're going to want the look and feel of your authentication and user desktops to match your company's user look and feel. That's much more easy to do on the cloud, right? It's UI driven, drag and drop and click a few buttons and experiment a bit and make it look good. So that's an important bonus there as well. So here we're showing we've got, let's say we're doing the whole thing. We're doing identity management and authentication authorization. So for single sign-on, we got identity gateway. We route our traffic through identity gateway, and we have the what you might call it, the gateway agent. That's what I'm looking for. Sorry, let me go over here. We have that for identity. So for identity purpose, you have your identities on the cloud. You got a copy of it there. It gets synchronized through the agent, and the agent can copy the data and synchronize it and keep it, however you need it. Anyway, that data can be synchronized again over here. So you could actually have it. So if you make a change on-prem, that information could be updated on the cloud, for example, like on AWS. And yeah, again, for authentication authorization, you could route your users through the identity gateway, going to your applications, right? And the identity gateway for policy decisions can talk to the cloud saying, hey, I've got this user, they want to do this, are they allowed? If they're allowed, they get access to your services internally or not. No, it's centralized on the cloud, authentication, authorization, wrangling of your identity information, synchronizing it, managing it, all hosted and managed by ForgeRock. You just use it. Yeah, I think personally, it's pretty awesome. So a few clicks away. Let's just do a quick little demo here and just the UI. So I'm going to log into what's called my tenant. I've invited myself, so I got a regular kind of email in here. When you log into the tenant, you should, in the real world, enable a multi-step, multi-factor authentication, two-step authentication, but I just don't in the training environment. Just keep it simple. Quicker to log in than I have to pull out my phone every time and type in a code. When you log in to the Identity Cloud, and this is the Identity Cloud, hanging out, created by ForgeRock. They build it, and they give you access to it, and you log in. You can create, there's settings here. I can set up settings, and I can add alternate admins, so you control who the administrators are. I added some initial accounts in here for training purposes, and I added myself. That's why I was just logging in. It's for administration purposes, it's everything or nothing. These are administrators. They can manage identity and access management through here. When you log in, once you've logged in, for actual configuration, we have these things called realms. For now, the basic idea of a realm is they can be configured differently, and they can have different identity stores. So for example, you might have separate identity stores for employees and customers. So you could use one of these realms for customers and another one for employees, because you probably want to configure things separately and differently for them. Right? So when we work, we usually have to tell it a realm we want to do something in. Now, in your realm, the kind of major parts we have here is a section for identities. So I can see any identities I have in the system right now. And these identities can come from on-prem through those connectors. And so we can synchronize from the cloud, on-prem, wherever they are. We can bulk load them in here. So for example, I got a demo user I could search for in here. And you can see the user, just basic information. Right? So I see information about them. And connecting, this is where those remote connection servers. So if I want to get information from outside of the cloud, bring it into Identity Cloud here, then yeah, I set up connectors, and then I can configure synchronization through these connectors. As I mentioned, I can do a bulk import if I really wanted to. Right? So that's a bit of the identity management stuff. Now this UI is growing, and they are adding more and more functionality to it, but it doesn't do everything and control everything you can do. So we do have access to the native consoles down here. So the identity manager, if you want to do something that hasn't been ported into the new UI here, yeah, you can go over here and log into OpenIDM, well, IDM nowadays. And you can go in and see your configuration of your connectors and mappings and how you synchronize your data. Right? Not everything. If you can do something through the major UI, you should do it there, not through here. It's changing a bit. Slowly, they're moving all the functionality out of these native interfaces and moving it into the default one. Right? But they're still there if you need them. Right? So if it's not here, it's down over there. Here's those journeys. So as I mentioned, journeys for doing authentication, for registration, social registry, updating passwords. So this is not just for authentication, it's also for self-service. I want to register. I need to reset my password. So here's a journey that does the resetting the password. As I said, this is all an interface that you can customize. If you needed something added in here, for example, you wanted to know how long it takes someone to log in on average, I could grab some nodes and I could actually add them in there. I could do things like this. This actually starts a timer, and then I could say, well, once it's done, then just before I update it, or maybe only after. Yeah, no, let's do it over here. I can drag this over here, and now I'm going to be timing. I can give a name to these timers, and then I can see them through the metrics. So if we can integrate with Prometheus and whatnot, and you'd be able to see all of it. So the flexibility of this is really awesome. You make it do what you want. And so there's all kinds of nodes in here for doing all kinds of things, utilities, metering, page. Yeah. Great. Yeah. So journeys, awesome. I just love journeys. Oh, the UI, yeah, the hosted pages I mentioned there. So if you want to theme things, you can see you can make custom themes and work with them. So bootstrap themes, both for the user page, what it looks like, and what components you see. So here's like a user's dashboard. You control what's there. Control the layout, what they see. If you don't want to do trusted devices or authorized applications, you could remove that from their UIs. So that's all there. If I want to change the logos that are seen, if I want to change the shape of things, I don't know, styles. I don't know, let's go navigation. Yeah, change all of the style information in there. Yeah. Yeah, it's just cool. Very, very flexible. All right. What are we doing for time? Oh, look at that.
We've got about 5 more minutes until we can jump into questions.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think I'm going to leave it there. Let's see if there's any questions.
Sure. If you just want to go a couple of slides down, then I can close it up and open for questions.
Yeah, well, let's just do that. Yeah. Training and certification. Oh, by the way, yeah, I suppose I need to talk about this. Yeah. Yeah, what LDAPs are supported? All current LDAP. Yeah, standard LDAP for sure. I don't know that. Let's go with training. So yeah, the examples here, well, you can see, you may have noticed there's like FR300 in there. The FR300 is a new course from ForgeRock. It is high level, right? So it goes over, yeah, you know, all the stuff that we've discussed here, and gives you hands-on experience in a lab environment to try it all out. It's a 3-day class. But it doesn't go into everything. It's meant to be high level. For example, it doesn't get into like AM policies for authorization. Doesn't go into super detail. It's just really get you in there, get you using it, get you 80% of what you really need to do. That's the FR300 class. If you need more, you want to go, there's a new Identity Cloud deep dive class. This is the IC 400, so 400 level. And yeah, it goes much more into detail and customization, especially when it comes into authentication and authorization. And yeah, more, deeper, better, faster. It's a 5-day class, right? And more labs, more details. If you're going to be the expert, well, yeah. As you saw, there's a lot to this stuff. So, all right.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. Just at the end here, before we open it to questions, I just wanted to let you all know that we have an exclusive savings benefit for everyone who attended this webinar. So you can get 15% off your virtual and classroom training, or 10% off your on-demand training. That includes subscriptions or self-paced courses. So when you go to our website, you can see the URL right there. You could go to Learn21, or just use the promo code Learn21. And as long as you register by November 30th, you can take advantage of these savings. So definitely encourage you to do so. Okay, so this was a great presentation. We do have some questions that have come in, Michael. So I will start going through those with you, and we can jump into anything that you can answer for us.
Sure. I'm going to beat you to it.
Sure. Go for it.
Do it. So yeah, just Gabriel there asked a question: how many realms are available? It's just 2. That's one of the issues. So it's just 2 realms: the Alpha and the Bravo realms. As for LDAP, the current LDAP is supported. AD is supported through LDAP as well, and Heath? So the Docker files provided, well, the Docker images provided in Docker Hub are not meant to be used in production. You are meant to build your own from the Docker files they supply. That's really what they're kind of, I guess, what they mean by that. From a support standpoint, they support the product. They don't support the environment it's running in. So that's where that's coming from. The running it in a Kubernetes environment, they have actually teach the DevOps class for doing that. So the platform runs in Kubernetes, as I mentioned earlier, and they supply the tools and everything to build and manage it. It is not for the faint of heart, to be brutally fair. When you're, it's not, hey, you just run a Helm chart and it's installed and off you go. It's meant for you to help you deploy it, to give you the building blocks to deploy it on Kubernetes, and for you to customize it the way you really need it. It still is, yeah, it still needs your input and a lot of work. But we do have how long is that course? A 3-day DevOps class that I teach. A lot of that course is, most people need to learn Kubernetes and some of the tools we use. So like scaffold and customize and how those things were put together. There's a Git repository that ForgeRock has to help you do that. Yeah, people do deploy it on Kubernetes. For sure. But it's a whole lot easier if you use the Identity Cloud. Then you don't have to worry about any of it. But then you lose a little bit of control. So for example, if you're running Kubernetes, it totally supports whatever you want to do. Everything's like supported in the sense of you can do it, you can accomplish it. Whether what you're trying to do is exactly supported by ForgeRock support, that's a little different. But definitely you can do what you want to do, like custom nodes and things like that. Whereas in the Identity Cloud, for now, they're currently not supporting custom journey nodes, tree nodes, right? But they have so many that's less important than it used to be. Can you integrate IAM with, yes, absolutely, Splunk, yeah, absolutely. Your audit logs, it's totally customizable, pluggable. You can have your own scripts, event-driven. Yes, yes, you definitely can. I think, any other questions, comment?
There's a couple in the chat. One of them is, can users manage their own profiles?
Yep. Yes, they can. And that's the customized UIs we can, in the Identity Cloud, we can manage the look and feel of it. And this is where they can see the identity information you have. They can sign up for, what we call preferences, which controls their data being synchronized into external systems. You want to get emails, as I mentioned that. Also sharing their data with third parties like marketing. That can all be controlled in their dashboard. They can delete their own accounts. Well, yep, they can see and manage their own identity information. Is DS part of the identity platform? So ForgeRock directory server, I assume that's what you're talking about, LDAP server. It does, well, it depends on what the identity platform. Yeah, definitely. Because AM, which is part of the platform, it needs to store all of its tokens, identity tokens and things like that if you're doing UMA, and those things need to be in a ForgeRock directory servers. And so mostly it's AM part of it. It requires some ForgeRock directory servers. Yeah, they were there. I might not have mentioned it when I was in the slides, but here, if I go back to AM, that right. Actually, I didn't do it there. Where did I do it? It was in the HA part. I think I didn't mention it, but where was that? I lost my slide, but oh, there it is. From current slide. No, from current slide. Well, where was the HA one? Yeah, here. These guys here. When I talked about AM, these need to be ForgeRock directory servers, and that's what those are. So core token service, config store. There's extra info. Oh yeah, there's a lot more than what we talk about here, for sure.
Hey, Mike, did you address the questions that were in chat?
Yep, that's what I've been looking at.
Okay, I went offline accidentally. Just want to double check. Thank you.
Yep. Oh yeah. So I think, is there any other questions? Well, come on training and you can ask questions all day, every day for as long as you want. So yeah, I'm going to give you guys my email address. Some people are probably going to think I'm crazy to do this, but I'm going to give you my email address. And if you do have any questions later on, feel free to email me, michael.stapleton@techdata.com. Make sure I spelled it right. So yeah, if you guys have any questions or anything, feel free.
Thank you so much, Michael. This was a great presentation. We really appreciate it. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.